We've made guides for all of the individual factions in Immortal Empires, but what about how to actually play the base game? Today we're going to go over every single thing you need to know to start your first campaign in Total War Warhammer 3. Also, stick around till the end of this video to find out how you can get 1 month of free premium Skillshare. Now, before we get into any campaign, we need to pick a faction, and I'm not going to spend too much time here since it really does come down to personal preference. But if you're just starting out, I highly recommend Tyrion from the High Elves if you own Immortal Empires. If you don't, then Miao Ying from Cathay and Realms of Chaos is probably the easiest way to get you started. Alternatively, you can try the prologue, which will teach you the basics of the game as you play and slowly introduce you to all the core mechanics. For this video, we're going to go with Tyrion since that lets us get into Immortal Empires, which is the preferred campaign for pretty much all players. So once you load into the game, you're going to be met with this, and there are a whole load of things to understand if you're brand new. On the top left, it's all menus and help pages, so if you're really into reading how to play, there's lots there. But you're watching a video, so chances are you're not into that sort of thing. Along the top, you have your main resources, and every single faction in the game will have some variation of gold. No matter what it's called, this will be the currency that basically everything either creates or consumes. Whether you're getting loot from battles or recruiting new units, it's going to be gold 99% of the time. You might have some other resources here too, such as influence for the High Elves, but this will vary from faction to faction. Onto the top right, here you have the minimap, which can be clicked on to zoom your view around, as well as zoomed in and out with the mouse wheel. Then you have 4 tabs: events, which lets you know basically everything that happens, such as completed research and buildings, battle results, and quest progression. Lord and Hero shows all the Lords and Heroes in your faction and can be double clicked on to locate each one. Provinces shows you all the provinces you own or have vision over, as well as their control status and income. Finally, known factions lists all factions you have knowledge of and displays basic info such as their opinion of you and trade status. The bottom of the screen changes depending on what you have selected. If you have a Lord or a Hero, on the bottom left, we have whatever Lord or Hero you have selected as their portrait. This bar on the top left shows their remaining movement range for this turn, and the number shows their level and will display a small arrow when they have points to spend. The blue button will take you to the details page where you can take a closer look at these selected units and any items they have. Finally, the minus icon can be clicked on to show you a choice of movement stances which affect the distance they can move, as well as a massive number of other aspects depending on your faction. In the middle bottom, you have your currently selected character's army. From here you can see how much gold per turn the army costs to upkeep and how many units they have out of their total capacity, which is always 20. The button on the bottom left allows you to recruit more units if possible, and the one on the right allows you to recruit regiments of renown if any are unlocked. If you have a settlement selected, the bottom left will show all of the major info you need to know about the region. Growth fills up the ring and creates population surplus, which allows you to increase the size of your settlements to unlock more building slots. Income, of course, shows how much money that region is producing per turn, and this can be disabled to increase control. Speaking of which, control, which is on a bar from -100 to +100. Each tier does something different for your faction, but ideally you want to keep it as high as possible, as getting to the minimum will result in a rebellion which creates a hostile army in your lands that will attack your settlements until dealt with. You can keep it high with buildings, your preferred type of corruption, and by having Lords and Heroes present in the region. Corruption shows the level of the 7 types of corruption in that region and any effects from them. This is spread via armies and settlement buildings, and each type competes with the prevailing type, decreasing the amount of all others. Finally, province effects is anything specific affecting that region at the moment. On the bottom, you have the province you have selected a settlement in. The settlements are split up with their own building slots. Empty slots can be hovered over to choose from a list of available buildings. Blue is ports, which bring a variety of bonuses depending on the faction. Orange is trade resources that are only available for certain locations and can be used in trade agreements for more gold, so are always worth picking up. Pink is landmark buildings that again can only be built in specific locations and are often unique, so are very worth building pretty much all the time. Red is basic military, where you'll find most lower tier units. Purple is advanced military, where you'll find more elite units. Yellow is defense, where you'll find walls and other ways to defend your settlements. And finally, green is infrastructure, where you'll find buildings for growth, income control, and a range of other region specific bonuses. If any of these buildings have a glowing hammer icon, they can be upgraded to higher tiers, including settlement buildings themselves. Along the bottom, we also have a number of useful buttons. First is the default view. Second is garrison details, which shows you the garrison of each of the settlements in the province, and a garrison is simply the army stationed to defend the settlement when attacked. The building browser opens a large menu to select buildings from, and makes it a lot easier to see than hovering in the menu. You can also recruit Lords and Heroes provided you have the right buildings and capacities. Lords lead armies and are purely used for battling, whereas Heroes can perform actions on the campaign map to otherwise disrupt enemy factions, as well as embed themselves in your armies to provide a range of combat skills. Finally, the bottom right of the screen varies from faction to faction, but you'll almost always have most of them. The medal icon shows you any missions your faction has, as well as victory conditions for officially completing your game to different levels. The scroll icon takes to the diplomacy menu, which we're going to cover in a moment, and the quill takes to the research screen, where you can select available research projects to work on. The Sword of Cain is a relic that any faction can claim, and clicking on this icon shows you where it is on the map, allowing you to more easily find it and claim it. Finally, the hourglass will end the turn, but this icon changes if there are possible actions to take before ending the turn, but these can be skipped with the arrow button to the right. And I know what everything does, we can get to actually playing the game. When you start almost any campaign, you'll have one army and one settlement. With the army, you're going to fight hostile factions to expand and defend your territory. Most games start you against a fairly weak army that can be easily auto-resolved for a quick win and allow you to maybe take a settlement all in one turn. You want to be careful about losing units early on, since replacing them isn't free, especially when you don't have much gold. When auto-resolving, you can hover over the button and any units in red will be killed upon clicking, so try and keep them safe when you can, either by manually battling or getting a more powerful force together either by replenishing or recruiting. Once you've done all you can in a turn with an army, you can get to work on settlements. These will be where basically everything in your faction is made, from new units to trade resources as well as passive income. Early on, I would advise rushing growth whilst getting recruitments unlocked for the best units you can afford at the time. This will ensure your settlements continue to increase in size, which means more and better buildings, which can mean more income as well as better units available to you. Later on, you can adopt an every other province approach, which means every other province is used for recruitment, with the rest being used for pure income, meaning you have a healthy sea of gold to swim in, as well as the ability to be only a turn away from recruitment no matter where you are in your lands. Going back to your army, early on you'll want to steadily increase in size, making a balanced early army, which I've covered for each faction in my individual guides. But as a general rule of thumb, an equal amount of front lines and ranged, and then the odd few bits of cav or monsters if you can handle them in battle. If not, you can't go wrong with more missiles and melee, especially early on and especially on lower difficulties, which I highly encourage you play on when you're just getting started. You want to use this army to continually expand your territory whenever possible, and having them battling pretty much constantly for a number of reasons. Of course, expanding means more space for more buildings, some more resources, and overall a more powerful faction. Battles also provide post-battle loot, which is a great way to get lots of gold fast early on, as long as you're not losing tons of units and spending all that cash replacing them. And finally, you're going to level up your lord and heroes with all the combat, which can be spent on a range of skills depending on your lord or hero. I have a whole video explaining how to level every single character in the game, but as a general rule of thumb, the priorities are like so. First up spells, then anything unique if it's a legendary lord, the blue tree focusing on replenishment and extra loot, red tree focusing on your key later game units, and then a little love to the lord themselves here or there. But of course, how are you supposed to know who to fight and who to be friends with? In a game called Total War, the choice really is up to you. But when getting started, it's much easier to be diplomatic and make some friends. Diplomacy can vary from faction to faction, especially if we're talking about the evil factions. If you're a good or neutral faction, you'll probably be able to make friends with a number of other factions nearby, especially those of the same race as you. You can always tell how a faction feels about you, either by the face next to their faction in the list, or their leader when they're selected. For example, as Tyrion, we start nearby to a lot of other high elves, and most of them will be willing to be friends with us and get some early deals on the go. I made videos all about how exactly diplomacy works in Warhammer 3, so we'll go over it again quickly. Most factions can engage in a large number of deals, either from the custom deal builder or the quick deal menu. No matter what tier of player you are, I would encourage you to use the quick deal menu almost all the time, as it saves you so much time looking around factions, trying to make deals that will never succeed. From here you can select from all the deals possible in game and see the likelihood of acceptance from every faction you've discovered so far. Clicking on a faction will take you to the same deal builder as before, only now you haven't wasted your time only to find out you have terrible odds. From here you can modify the deal by adding gold, war joinings, and much more to build exactly what you want. The AI will always accept if the deal is calculated as being fair, so long as this number is green, you're golden. And if you want to know what each deal means, we'll go through them quickly. Non-aggression pact means both factions promise not to attack each other and will face severe diplomatic penalties with all factions if they do. Trade agreements, which allow factions to trade any tradable resources they have access to make some gold in the process. Military access, which allows armies to move through each other's borders without diplomatic penalties. Defensive alliances, which causes each faction to leap to the other's aid if attacked. Military alliances, which expands this to joining any wars that other factions start. Joint confederation, which will cause all of the target factions, settlements, and armies to become yours, and can only be done by certain factions to other factions of the same race. And finally, peace treaties, which of course end wars. Diplomacy is half of war, since it tells you who to fight and who to work alongside, so building up some allies can be a great investment to aid you against wars that would otherwise be impossible. I would recommend getting any faction you want to be friends with on side early, and hold off from upgrading to defensive alliances until you're really ready to commit some big multi-faction wars, as the last thing you want is them getting attacked and pulling you into something you have no hope of surviving. For the high elves, especially Tyrion, it's fairly easy to make friends with the majority of the high elves on the donut, to the point where they may be open to confederation. This is a great use of your time to get the whole island under your direct control without the need for a whole lot of fighting. Just be sure to go through and optimize any lands you claim, as the AI isn't exactly known for building in the best in any sense of the word. But of course not everyone can be your friend, and in a game called Total War, the W word is pretty inevitable. Honestly, wars are pretty straightforward in game. This isn't Stellaris or anything like that where your people tire of the constant war resulting in major penalties if you don't clear them up fast. The AI really can't force you into an unfavourable surrender unless they literally beat you back to one settlement. Once war is declared by either side, it's open season on each other's settlements and armies until either side is satisfied. The only added layer of complexity is if there are any other factions joining either side of the conflict, but even then it's just another faction to target as you roam the map. Before declaring war on a faction, check their strength ranking compared to yours, as if they vastly overpower you, you could find yourself in a sticky situation. Outside of that, you're pretty much cleared to war on basically any faction in the game. As long as you don't have a non-aggression pact or are going to be massively overwhelmed, you should be just fine. Simply send the best armies you have to take out the enemy faction settlements one by one until they're wiped from the map, or whilst avoiding letting them take any of your own territory. Take easy victories when you can to weaken their position before taking on their main force with an overwhelming one of your own. Stack multiple armies on top of each other to even the balance of power against particularly strong foes, and also resolve when it's safe to do so to save yourself some time. But if you really want to get the absolute most out of your armies, manual battling is the way to go, and in Warhammer 3, it's quite literally its own beast. Manual battles are where the real-time strategy part of the game comes in, as both armies move in real time to attempt to take each other out. You can either cause all enemy units to retreat or completely wipe them out. Either will get you the win, but there are a few things to know to make things easier. In traditional Total Wars, there's a rock, paper, scissors system of ranged beats melee, melee beats cav, and cav beats ranged. In Warhammer, with the addition of beasts and monsters, this changes somewhat, but they can still mostly fit into the same three categories. I made a video showing you how to use every single unit in the game, so I won't go into too much detail here, but generally, you want to play most battles like so. Use your melee troops to engage theirs and make a front line where both armies are stationary. Use range to barrage enemy melee troops on the front line to give your units an edge. Use cav and other fast units to take out enemy range to protect your army, and use larger and more powerful cav monsters to assist on the front lines with their massive power and presence. You also have lords and heroes, and in Warhammer, these are extremely powerful single entity units that can do a range of things such as fight on the front lines, cast powerful spells, and more. Find out what your characters are good at by looking at their stats and any abilities and spells, and have them perform that activity as often as possible to get value, but also be sure to keep them safe. They may be powerful, but they're not unkillable, and even the best lords and heroes can still go down if you don't use them properly. I also realize I haven't explained the UI in battle, but it is very straightforward. The top left is just the same. The top middle shows the battle time and the balance of power currently on the field. The top right allows you to change the speed of the battle, as well as view things from a zoomed out view. On the left, you have your currently selected unit's portrait and stats. Any abilities will be placed around the portrait. In the middle bottom, you have all your units. You can select units from here or by clicking on them directly. The buttons along the bottom are all pretty self-explanatory for the most part, but there are a few that aren't. Grouping units allows you to organize them in the army viewer and control them more easily by using the number keys to select each group. Guard mode simply means if a unit's target starts to outrun them, they won't chase it, so is useful for keeping your army more consolidated. If you have many units selected, you can use the formations button to either place melee or ranged in the front, instead of taking the 4 clicks it takes to do it manually. Enabling fire at will allows units to fire at any enemy units within their range without choosing any target in particular. Skirmish mode will cause ranged units to stay a safe distance from enemy units and is useful for skirmishing troops that can fire whilst running away. Other than that, it ends up causing units to run away far too much. Finally, withdraw causes those units to retreat from the battlefield to fight another day. And on the bottom right, you have your Winds of Magic, and if you have a spellcaster selected, any spells they can cast. Each faction has their own distinct playstyle, and you can choose from a range of strategies and battle plans. Then there's the obvious advice like target the largest threats on the enemy force, whether that's high damage ranged troop, explosive artillery, terrifying monsters, or deadly flankers. Getting rid of the best units on the enemy force over and over again will whittle them down in power quickly and make your army's job so much easier. On the other side of that, you want to protect the best units you have so you can continue getting value out of them. This may seem like really obvious and basic advice, but if you literally just follow these two pieces of advice effectively, you can win almost any battle. The more you play, the more you'll pick up which units can beat what, and know where to send which of your troops to get the most out of them without taking too much heat. If you manage to take out enough of the enemy army without losing too much of your own, you can trigger army losses, which cause a mass retreat on the enemy force, as they realise they have no chance of winning with their current force. When this happens, you can claim victory or run enemies down to ensure they don't creep back up on the campaign map for more. So far, I've only been shown regular land battles, but the same can be said for sieges too, no matter if it's a major or minor settlement. The only difference is the terrain and some advantages to the defender. During a siege, defenders can build towers and various traps, barricades and more to make the approach of attackers that much harder. These require control of capture points to build and be maintained, so attackers can take control of these points to wipe out enemy defenses instantly. If the settlement attacked is walled, attackers can build towers and battering rams to mount the walls and break open gates. In my opinion, always stick to towers, since if you're a faction that has units that can only use gates like monsters, just use them to break open the gate and keep an infantry unit safe from the shooting gallery that is manning the battering ram. These buildables are easy to use. Simply man them, select where you want them to attack along the walls or gates, and they'll just go and do it, giving you an easy way into settlements. If you have no buildables, you can always use the arse ladders every infantry unit carries around just in case. Just know that this will severely exhaust your troops, giving them a large disadvantage in the combat that no doubt awaits them at the top. When defending any settlements, maintain control of as many points as you can for as long as possible to maximise your defence budget, and keep any buildables alive for as long as possible. Inversely, as an attacker, target these points to cut the legs out from under defenders, and give yourself a much easier entrance into the settlement. No matter what battle type you find yourself in, however, the same basic advice will always apply. As long as you remember that, you should be getting wins in no time. Now let's take a quick break from how to get better at video games and take a moment to think about how you can get better at a range of creative skills using today's sponsor, Skillshare. If you've been living under a rock and haven't heard, Skillshare is the online platform with hundreds of creative classes to kickstart your side hustle or a new career path. If you've been looking to change your career or just get into creative work in general, Skillshare's online classes are a great place to start. Me personally, making YouTube content, Skillshare has a range of classes that are all incredibly useful to me, whether that's video editing, writing videos, or just general time management. No matter if you want to make online content, become an artist, or start making music, you'll be able to find a course that will set you on your first step in that creative journey. One class I've been enjoying is Productivity for Creators by Ali Abdaal. It's about how to build up schedules and habits that you can keep creating even when you don't have that flood of motivation. The class goes over how to rewire your brain by enjoying each step of the creative process to make the transition from downtime to work time so much easier. But if this doesn't sound like it's for you, there are literally hundreds of other classes for a massive range of creative topics, so you'll definitely be able to find something perfect to get you started. I'm going to give it a try at zero upfront cost, and check out the link in the description where the first 1,000 people to click will get 1 month of premium Skillshare absolutely free. And lastly, a huge thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring the channel and this video, and now I will return you to your content. And that is pretty much everything you need to know to get started in Warhammer 3. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comments below. Like, subscribe, and if you want to know which factions are the best, then check out this video to see every faction ranked from worst to best.